I have worked on newspaper, television, and a bit of radio. Okay, that's definitely a flex to start with, what the fuck? No, but seriously, I went to college to study science and techniques of communication, which is basically all media related practices in one simple, totally exhausting package that was just as useful as googling shit on the internet anyway. I've also worked on my own YouTube channel, cause from the start I knew that if there was ever a possibility of me becoming a YouTuber, I needed the skills to make sure I could make something of good quality. But ironically, while I did learn proper editing and did my best efforts to understand how to properly word my thoughts out for people to see without thinking I had a brain stroke, I also was able to notice a few things while working on both sides of this spectrum of content creation. Some of them are quite useful if you're a starting YouTuber like myself, while others are more of a flex for the YouTubers I'll set as examples. So welcome to Media vs Internet on this special edition of The Grey Line, where we're all right and wrong at the same time. Alright, let's start with the immediate correction here. Online content counts as media depending on how you word it. When I say media versus internet, I mean television, newspaper, and radio versus internet services. You can see one of the titles is easier to digest while the other makes you want to punch me in the face and take my lunch money. And even if you put any of the two sides in a positive or negative side in comparison, the professional gap between them has been turning much shorter with each day passing. Back in 2006, most people posting videos would be trying to get enough traction to become a topic of discussion on television. Which, alright, I don't see the need of hurting yourself worth it, but okay, sounds fair. But now, putting 2021 and 2020 as perspective, you have celebrities, people that made their name on television, as well as official companies that made their name on those traditional forms of media, trying to make sure they can dominate the online world. Oh yeah, Will Smith, the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, I'm sure his YouTube career follows a similar path than MatPat or something. What I'm saying is that the forms of media that used to be a wild dream to get in are now the ones trying to get into the culture of the internet, which on one hand doesn't always work since the mentalities don't match, but also force users to see YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and other platforms as something with potential that went beyond just catfishing people and telling them to suck your dick. What? People now create content not just to have fun, but to turn their user profiles into something people could look forward and be entertained by it on a more consistent basis. I may not have a certainty about what started it, the TV or the YouTuber, but when you look at both current TV shows and YouTube videos, newspaper articles to online blogs, and radio stations to podcasts, you might have a hard time being able to say which one came from where when looking at some of them based on their quality. However, there are still some differences that set the two apart from one another, but for reasons that make them unique from each other. The point of this video isn't an essay on the differences, but rather to create discussion about how those differences can allow us to not just appreciate the evolution of both areas, but to respect the work that gets put on both forms of content creation.
Unfortunately, most people, probably not a lot of us because we love YouTube, but most people still think that online media, especially YouTube, is lesser than traditional media. Even if it's all digital media, the platform matters.
The most important one of all is that the traditional media is more consistent. When you're watching a show on TV or buying a newspaper, what you get that first time is most likely what you're gonna get the next time and so on. Meanwhile, online content, even if it's from the same website or user, you have a bit of a roll the dice situation going on. When you're watching a TV show, I promise there's more to this video than just TV and videos, there's a specific amount of time that you're going to consume with an expected format of content. If you watch a series, you're gonna get a structure of its storytelling. If you watch news, you're gonna get a planned script with specific content. Meanwhile, YouTube videos, even when you're told about it through the title of the video, there's an uncertainty about where and how things are gonna go. The same kind of section can get longer due to the freedom of the uploads or the amount of information the person wants or needs to put in, which immediately leads us to our next point, creative freedom. Now I know that YouTube is always hard on creators based on their pacing, false/unfair copyright claims, the lengthiness of their videos, or even the viewership time, the amount of clicks you get, the list can go on, with some of them being points that they can't control. But with that and so many more issues that can be brought up, it's not hard for me to say that it's still much healthier to create content online than on other forms of media. Like I mentioned, traditional follows a certain structure that has to be followed no matter what, because every element added needs to be justified and approved by the executives, either by the amount of information you have to make the lengthiness valid, how much money is obtained by it, or how it benefits their current investors. So even when you do a focus group research to set your demographic, put on a good script, and contains all the sources to make sure this is a project that can connect with the world, if it doesn't further their agenda, it makes all the job worthless and gets tossed aside. The example I can give you is with news articles. They need to be straight and to the point, with a set of both minimum and maximum amount of characters to establish the extent of it. And they need to be sent to the chief editors, who will then send it to the executives to approve, with the possibility of them saying no, because they get support from somebody related to the notes, and therefore makes all the process meaningless. That's why most news stations bring dozens of news a day but tackle information that is very bare bones at times, like what someone said in a press conference or what happened today in traffic, or the weather. Well, the weather can also be used for 40 people, but the point is, they cannot make the best investigations possible because there's a lot of creative limitations. If I could bring a good example here would be Atrocity Guide, who made an entire documentary of Phoenix Jones, which is a very informative video that talks not only on the person behind the mask, but the overall superhero community, while professionals only talked about the times he will cause social problems for a few minutes. And while a good chunk of her video happened because of the way the media tackled the topic, as well as being a project that happened after the fact, it was because of that creative freedom that she got the opportunity to take her time and make her documentary as detailed and deep as it is. I do recommend you to watch it. Another point of debate here is the idea of following trends, which tends to be set on just online creators for the sake of clicks. And oh boy, you have no idea how one-sided that thought is.
Our ratings depend on knowing the trends. We're all caught up, that's how this song ends.
Because while that might be the case for online creators, traditional media has become probably even worse than the online side of things on that regard. You see, whenever somebody makes an independent news website or channel, even if they don't tackle local news like the professionals might be doing, that's still a competition to see who can make a publication faster so they can be the ones bringing the hottest and latest information. Which also causes them to ironically turn into a mess of misinformation for the sake of posting stuff faster. The amount of times we will see both social and traditional media post an article about some hot stuff only to be later on clarified or even debunked is actually alarming. That's why we have cancel culture in the current mess that it is today. Because one form of media would post first, ask questions later, causing the regular consumer to spread information first and maybe ask questions later. I'm not trying to bring any specific examples here since this could lead into a social problem or political that I don't feel prepared to tackle, but if you've ever seen drama online to people using bits or pieces as full-on arguments on a claim, then that's the media's fault for trying to be faster or smarter about what we put as information. Because if a news platform that's supposed to be transparent and an objective source of information isn't doing a good job at giving you information, then it's just as reliable as a drama channel. One of the most infamous review quotes out there is IGN's "too much water" quote, which, yeah, is a stupid observation to write down, but not because it's false or subjective, but because they're supposed to be professional writers expressing their thoughts in a way that can be considered for any kind of player who wanted their opinion before buying the game. There's a difference between too many water Pokemon and too much water, simply because of the fact that even my weak attempt to improve it makes the information a lot more specific on what the player needs to consider when playing the game. So once again, a platform that has so many benefits as a professional team shouldn't have the reduction of a Twitter shitposter. So yeah, that should be enough to cover another element of difference here, which is the accuracy and legitimacy of the content. And the only reason why traditional media is a bit more accurate than online content is because of both the limitations of their work and majorly because there aren't that many platforms or traditional media to compare. But trust me, being more accurate than the internet because there are less of you isn't quite an actual achievement. It's like saying that your city has less car accidents because you ride on horses. Another point of contention here is the speed of it. Unless you get paid in a commission format, media companies put a quota of content that must be delivered and you're doing it during that regular 9 to 5 shift. Of course you won't get paid extra hours, what the hell do you think you are, someone valuable? Come on. That means that you have less than 8 hours. Remember, you have to do the whole checking process if you're a creator on the professional side of things. To make your content, make sure it fits to the established length, get it checked and be sure that it's approved on time. And congratulations, you're the average worker on media. So while I can't say that one is easier than the other, on a technical level, online media allows people to make content on a much lighter pace in comparison. Now here's an actual example. When I was working as an editor for news at the TV station, the process was this. The journalist will send me the information both written and recorded, including interviews or voiceover needed for the article. I will edit it with a pre-established format, check the audio balance, select the fragments on the interview that are related to the information, render, upload, repeat. This will come in an amount of 6 to 12 videos a day, something that will be done in a span of 3 hours since the journalists will task all of their work 3 hours before the news were broadcasted. So even though most of the videos will last 2 to 3 minutes as the established length, the pressure came from the pacing in which the work will be processed rather than the quality of the video. I'm not saying that as a content creator you have to make daily content. After all, documentaries, animated features, or simply extended work takes a while to make sure it can be at least something to be proud of. But if you overthink too much about the quality of your work, you might set yourself on the burnout fire. Which leads me to the next point, production values. This doesn't automatically go towards the best effects and equipment, but the composition and style of it. Just because a book has over 300 pages and a pretty sophisticated typography doesn't automatically make it a good book. Making the best paintbrushes doesn't make an illustration a masterpiece by default. An article written with the fanciest words doesn't make it worth a Pulitzer, and a video with the best assets and visual effects doesn't automatically make it great.
No, some women like propositioning Sora for sex.
You gotta Disneyland it up.
Sure, I'll open your heart.
You gotta...
As I just mentioned, I will have to make all of those videos on a daily basis, and they were composed in a format that was straight, clear, and to the point, with the basic transitions and title cards so they could be reused on multiple videos, allowing the production to have, once again, the major positive traditional media has over online content: consistency. The same principle can be applied for online creators. Even though many people, from Let's Players to animators, may not be the best on their technical areas, they can achieve amazing things due to the fact that they focus more on the style rather than being the best. Makes sense, I swear! Take a look at John Tran's work. I repeat, take a look at John Tran's work, not the person, his work. He currently has a whole set and a production team that most traditional networks will love to have, but the real thing that shines in his work is the sense of humor and editing style, which is why people still hold his previous work in the same regard as the current one. It clearly has a better equipment, editing, and composition, but it wouldn't mean anything if it wasn't for his own craft and style of creating content. Which leads us to my final point of discussion here, communication. When content gets made online, you know who's posting it, you establish an interaction and therefore a more immediate bond with both your audience and the creator depending on the position. While traditional media ironically fails on that part of being a form of communication. At the beginning of 2020, I made an interview with Ben Crichton discussing this same factor.
I think we're at a point now where content isn't enough. Like I know the saying is content is king. You gotta have content. Content is necessary but not sufficient, because the fact is it's not like we're in danger of running out of content. High quality content. People call this time in the pop culture landscape peak TV because there are so many incredibly high quality TV series out there. If all you want is the highest quality audiovisual content you can get yourself a Netflix subscription and you're set.
Yeah,
content is fine, but if you don't have a passionate community around it, it's pointless. The content is a means to an end.
The major message of this video is that the days of the internet being a place to post silly things and nothing more have changed drastically in terms of the possibilities you can achieve. Did you know that there's a DSI with the brand of McDonald's that also included 3 games focused on training for their employees? That's a thing. That's a piece of information that you probably wouldn't know if it wasn't for the online media. Is it useful? Probably not, but it's just as useful as half of the stuff we see on History Channel, so yeah, think about it. Don't get me wrong, you can still post whatever you want for the sake of posting and you're fine, but the more the years go by, the internet has become more into an alternative for content creators to make a name for themselves and even self-employment, to the point where now the companies are trying to get into that world and take control of it too. I don't see traditional media dying anytime soon, since in order for that to happen, you will need to turn the internet into something everybody, and I mean everybody, can have access to. Otherwise, you will still have people reading the local newspaper or watching stuff on TV due to be more accessible. Okay, there are people that simply have local TV as their way of information, and they're not as much of a minority as you might think. But just because something or someone is on the internet rather than on other forms of media doesn't mean they were made with less passion or love. Both forms of work can take the same amount of effort, with some moments of one surpassing the other. And while not as common, online creators are also not better than industry workers. The only reason why YouTube managed to have a partnership program is because they work, for better or worse, on the same mentality those companies have used to work. You don't believe me? Well, this video is sponsored by... Is this the perfect world where both forms of media can coexist? Most likely not, since people still think that doing stuff online certainly makes it less worthy. But I also think we have enough freedom to let anybody grow, get better, and achieve goals that only the internet could have given them. And I hope that you have even thought about doing something online, you give yourself the chance for what's ultimately an interesting journey. Thanks for listening.
Many YouTubers are huge, but not mentioned often in mainstream news because they are unproblematic faves and they don't have any controversy or scandals in order to be in the mainstream media, because we know that the mainstream media is not out there posting anything positive about YouTubers.